Hi there, welcome to Gaining Vision. I'm Melanie. Thanks so much for clicking. To my returning subscribers, thanks so much for continuous love and support. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please feel at home. Do you feel women are represented fairly in the media? I definitely don't. And when I came across a beautiful conversation from a show on SABC called Media and Society, marking the celebration of August being Women's Month, they had a beautiful discussion about this topic. And I wanted to share some really great facts and points from this interview that really hit home. And it's something that we as a global society should really pay attention to because it is happening across the globe.
Well, this morning on Media and Society, we're discussing how women in politics and positions of power are reported on by the media. Well, hello and welcome to Media and Society. I'm your host, Taddeo-Nxumalo. Always a pleasure having you on the show with us. And of course, this is really the show where we take a look at the intersection between the media and society. As we enter the hour, we are, of course, going to be kicking off for Women's Month. And we thought, let's have a discussion around just how the media actually portrays women who are in powerful positions. In the modern day era, women have made significant strides in breaking so many barriers and ascending to prominent leadership roles across various fields, including politics, business and governance. However, a critical aspect that demands attention is how these women in positions of power are portrayed by the storytellers of our nation, the media, when their accomplishments and decisions become the subject of public discourse, right? The media's representation of women in leadership roles plays, of course, a very important role in shaping how these women are viewed by the public. This topic delves into the complexities of a media portrayal, shedding light on potential gender biases, stereotypes, and the overall impact on women's experiences as they navigate the multifaceted landscape of leadership.
The panel was made up of many people from different perspectives, women in media, people from the Media Monitoring Africa, individuals from different political parties, as well as students in communication preparing to be journalists.
So we are joined in studio this morning by the one and only Ms. Mbali Ntuli, who's the CEO and founder of Groundwork Collective, former DA member. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
An absolute pleasure having you with us. We have Yologa Zimfuto, who is a political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. We're joined via Zoom by Nomshado Nkosinkulu, who is the head of communications at Media Monitoring Africa. Nomshado, a good morning to you, and thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you. Morning to everyone.
Yeah, I've got some powerful women on the show this morning. Really looking forward to it. Also joining us is Gugu Dlamini from the ATM's Women's League and Nonhlanhla Makuba from the IFP Women's Brigade. Ladies, thank you so much for giving us your time. Looking forward to the discussion. I'm going to start here in studio, though, before we bring in some of our guests.
So it had a vast opinion. And what they were focusing on is women in power and how they're represented in the media, if they're represented at all. And if they are, is it representation or actually for genuine reasons? Now, we all know there is going to be gender bias, and women have fought many years to be heard, seen, and valued, and respected. We've made some progress in this, but media still hasn't picked up on this, and they explore why that is. In this video, they share their thoughts on how women are represented in media.
I think female politicians are represented unfairly in the media. They mainly use stereotypes when referencing to women. They use their femininity. They're also seen as weak and undecisive.
You can't speak about the portrayal of women in the media without looking at the history. So women were previously marginalized, excluded, dominated, and suppressed. And right now, the media plays a critical role because it has transformed how women are portrayed and how they're seen by the public. If you look at the media mostly, there's always those subtle languages that portray women in a sexist manner or in a way that they're incapable. So the narrative has to change, and it has to show that women are capable of leading.
A lot of them felt that they're not being seen or heard because it isn't a priority for the media companies. A lot of women in media don't have a voice, therefore are not asking for women to be represented there. Others feel that women in politics or in positions of power are not easily accessible, by the media, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with, but this is what they were sharing.
I think when you're talking accountability, as you mentioned and highlighted, that the mechanisms are there. But I think it also speaks to what initiatives need to happen on top of that. For example, promoting gender equality in newsrooms, having more women making, decisions and giving those diverse perspectives. Media literacy as well. I think one of the guests, they spoke about how women are beyond, their images or beyond their age or their gender. You have policymakers, you have those that are influencing the economy. Educating the public in the importance of actually engaging with that content also helps. And I think one of the elements as well, when it comes to reporting transparently, historically it always used to be an issue of, well, where do we get these voices? How do we access these voices? They're not there. It's actually putting in the effort to say that this is the structure, and look into the structure, investigate the structure, and find those voices that can be amplified and create the environment for them to actually feel comfortable to come forward. Because as mentioned before, that maybe it's the sense of they might take my story and put it in a different framing. So language and framing is also very important. Moving away from, the stereotypical way of engaging with women or focusing on appearance will help immensely.
They want to make sure that these women in power have the right information to share when they are being interviewed, if at all. And then, of course, they talked about the biases that were faced in South Africa specifically, how history plays a big part. Women have been seen as less than, and that they shouldn't have a voice. And unfortunately, the patriarchal society still stands. So when it comes to politics, a lot of politicians are seen as men, and they have the right and they know everything because they're in power.
So personally, I think we can do a better job in how, as a media, we represent and portray women who are in politics, because obviously young women who are in school, young women who are aspiring to be in politics as well, are looking to see positive influences, are looking to see positive representations of women in politics, and I also think that the representation of Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma when they were choosing who was going to represent, who was going to lead rather the ANC, it was as if the questioning of qualifications and the questioning of whether she was suitable for the job gave an impression that perhaps women are always going to be they're always going to be proving whether they deserve to be in certain spaces.
But when women in politics have a voice, they're usually held accountable and asked many questions more about their qualifications than men are in politics. Often they're shown in counteractions or juxtapositions of what the male counterparts are saying. They're not called upon to share their perspectives or views on a policy or their plans for their party. They're in fact focusing more on, you're so young, you're so pretty, why politics? And this shows a bias in media. So it's important that the media not only does cover women in media, but also that they're being represented accurately and effectively and giving an opportunity and a platform for them to share the important stuff, what their policies are, how they are going to take action, and what they're actually doing on the ground. Not about any scandals or anything that's happening about women versus men. That shouldn't be the focus, and I think that's what this panel is showing.
What did you think when you heard of this topic, when our producers reached out to you and said, well, the media's portrayal of women in politics, is it something that you've always wanted to perhaps you wanted to see touched on?
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I think that there's a statistic that less than 20% of women are actually quoted in politics in particular. And there's even an organization called Quote This Woman that is in South Africa that's part of the, I think, independent publishers that basically exist to have women voices. And so women across the different aspects that you were talking about are able to be on this database, and when the media looks for an expert woman on something, they're able to access them because maybe it was an issue of access. And when I heard of this topic, I thought it was really great because having been a woman who was in politics, I think that there was a lack of real delving into what my particular thoughts were, and it was always about particularly, the infighting that maybe women are having within their political parties, or the fact that, I'm being juxtaposed to what a male politician has said. And I think it's interesting. And I think that, to be fair to the media, there hasn't been systemically a lot of women in the media space for a long time until recently who've had the power to also have these conversations, to push them by being the women even in those newsrooms that were able to drive it forward. So I think it's a relevant conversation to be having now as we become a society that also accesses news in a lot more different forums too.
They also were talking a lot about how men in positions of power in politics and business seem to have the forefront on everything. And they talked about the Women's League event for the ANC, where the SG was asking the women at the Women's League group questions, and we're talking down to them as if I am power, you must obey to me. And that really rankles a lot of people. It also gives the public questionable thoughts of, do women in power actually have a say? Are they actually being heard? And should we give our time and energy to these women?
I mean, there's something to be said about even coming out of the ANC Women's League, that there's something to be said about even the presence of the ANC leadership and the male voices that were inside the conference. I mean, is that a concern?
Yes, it was. I remember the SG was addressing the Women's League, and he said, "Nimamela madoda," and the way he speaks to them as if like, yes, you are women, and you must listen to me. I'm a man, I'm talking. And it was very problematic. You can check the nuances and how, but the room was electric. The women were clapping hands. It's a few women who actually went up and said that these men, they come into our spaces and they command the space as if this is their room, right? But the nature is the nature of politics. I think in South Africa, and globally, the politics are heavily men. And men, they get into the political spaces and assume it's their homes. They assume that the space allows them to actually exercise their patriarchal powers. Hence, now the SG would find no problem to actually come and address a women's conference like that.
They also talked about women in business leading organizations and companies across the globe that are not getting the opportunities to share, again, their policies, their procedures, the work that they're doing, but in fact are focused, again, on scandals, how they look, how they appear, and again, what they said. They sensationalize their personal lives instead of what the facts are and what's important for the public to hear.
And similarly with business, and other places. I mean, we have Vusi Mavuso, she's the head of PLSA. We have Nolisa Fakute, who's the head of Anglo. We have the Wendy Luhabes at Pepcore. We have all these incredible business leaders, but we don't hear about them. We hear about the usuals, the Christovisas, the Koos Beckers. And again, they've been captains of industry for a long time, but now we do have these incredible women, and they need the media to help them to have the platforms and the access to say what it is they're doing, so that we can see that there are women like that are already in leadership, and we can feel that those companies or those organizations might be going towards certain ways. For all I know, at Alexander Forbes, which also has a black female head of it, they have transformative policies on what women can do in the workplace now. We'll never know that because the media doesn't focus on them. And there needs to be a discussion on why that is still happening in this particular age, when we've worked so hard as women to try and cross these barriers and these ceilings.
So some solutions that they talked about, which I really was impressed by, is obviously having people understand it's not just the women that need to fight for this. We need to educate the men to change the narrative, to not stick with the history and thinking we live in a patriotic society. In fact, it's their responsibility to focus on the good women are doing, not only in politics, but in business.
And as a scriptwriter myself, as a filmmaker, I believe like it's important for me to represent issues on the grassroots level. Number one, by addressing the inequalities, by addressing all the sexism that is happening within the country. And as a male, if it is done by us, because most of the time the marginalization is done by people who are the opposite gender. So as a male, as someone who's a storyteller, I believe that it lies upon me, or it lies on me, to change the narrative of how women are represented, to change the whole storytelling narrative in South Africa.
Talking about this is a two-way street. Yes, women need to play their part, but also we need to ensure that men are also seeing us as equals. In society, women across the globe are seen as less than. And this is something we've been fighting very hard for. But if it's always women doing the work, the narrative's not going to change, because men need to do the work just alongside of us as allies.
I really want to, enter the media space and actually make a difference, because I have a grandmother who has certain ideas and indoctrinated ideologies about what a woman is supposed to be in society, what a woman's role in society is supposed to be, and obviously that needs to change. We've learned that through our our theory here in academia and all. And I also have a young sister who is growing up in a world that is dominated by ideas about what a female is supposed to be, how they're supposed to carry themselves and all of that. Obviously that needs to be amended and changed. And so I'm looking forward to actually working in the media space and making differences about these ideas and changing the narrative in a way. I hope I'll be able to do that.
They also shared the importance that we ensure that the next generation, the youth, are invested and interested in going into politics and business as leaders, and making sure they're equipped with the tools and information that they need to represent well. Because if the women currently in politics or in business as leadership leave, we will have a vacuum and there will not be consistency.
This topic needs to be broken down, because it's not only the media that has a responsibility to portray women in the political arena, but even the very political parties that we are in have a role to play in making sure that we grow our young women to get into positions of power that we are in at the moment, so that when we move out, there won't be any vacuum. So what I can say is that as the IFP, we do have the challenges that most political parties do have. We do have issues of patriarchy, but we are dealing with it, because what we are saying as the Women's Brigade is that we can't be the biggest number in the party as women. In the IFP, most members are female. And when we last checked the stats, it was the women that was even above 50% of membership in the IFP. But when you check positions, women that are holding, you don't see the same.
What I also found very interesting is that Media Monitoring Africa shared some stats. They've been monitoring the media since 1994. And yes, they're far from where they need to be in representation of women in the media. And a lot of it is because media feels that their women's perspectives are not as important as the men's. It's also about where the money is and what is happening, who's being paid to cover what story, and what information from each event, even if the media shows up, is actually making it to the final edit.
So just to give a bit of a background, so Media Monitoring Africa has been monitoring elections since 1994, or media in general. And so we've really, started monitoring literally when we stepped into this new democratic era where women are now given the platform to actually push their voices across. And interestingly enough, since then, we're still battling to even come halfway. We're not talking about whose voices are being heard, whose voices are being amplified. I mean, just to give an example, 2021, we're looking at 19% of female voices heard. In 2019, previous elections, we're looking at 20% of voices being heard. And looking at the makeup of women in our country, which is 51%, and knowing very well that there are those female voices within the various parties or within the political landscape to be able to actually give voice to certain issues or to societal issues at that current point. And to see that the trend over the years is, and the improvising for it, the improvising for it, and how we are actually getting to a point of us saying that we're getting there. It's literally in staggered, amounts. We're getting 1% improvement, 2% improvement, 5%, maybe in some cases when we are really looking at, us getting to where we want to be. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done when we're coming to the point. Are we really representing all the voices that are there? Are we really showcasing women's impact within the political ecosystem?
They also shared the importance of women being accessible. Now, what does that mean? Being accessible and ready and prepared for interviews when called upon, to feel confident in their abilities and that they're prepared to come and speak to the media so that their voices are being heard and the positive side of women, so that we change that narrative for the public, and therefore they're going to want to hear more from women voices.
that is why then I went in and I said also political parties have to prepare their female reps to engage with the media, making sure that they have the knowledge of the subject matter.
Yeah.
You know, things like your party policies, so that they have enough information to respond to the journalists when asked questions. So, and sometimes this lack of information creates women not to want to respond to journalists because they shy away from media, as they know that they would not want to be embarrassed. So there is a two-way relationship here that has to happen between us as political parties and the media, because the media can't do it on its own, and we cannot, just like it nicely said it now, we cannot do it on our own as just a political party. We need to involve the media in order for the media to actually also assist us by putting all the matters out there in the public for the public to see.
As I mentioned, women are not being represented in the media because of men. It could be in the media, but also could be because of money. Other men leaders across the globe are getting away with sex scandals and a lot of things that they're saying that are disparaging against women in politics, in power. And I think this plays a big factor. If you look at Donald Trump, when he was running for president of the United States, he had comments about he could touch a woman's private parts at any time and not be called out on it. And he was bragging about this. He had many sexual allegations against him, and it didn't seem to fizz or even affect any of the people voting for him. This was covered in the media, where the other perspective of the women, it was covered very little.
Let me ask you this. Do we, to a certain extent, personalize women too much? And I'll give you an example of that, right? Where we've seen political leaders, and I'm not going to go into particular names, but female political leaders have a sex scandal, for instance. Sometimes it seems as if that's the end of the road for their political career. We don't treat men the same, do we?
Yeah, definitely we don't. So we've seen a number of politicians with sex scandals. They come back and have a good comeback. Even the way the stories are told, right? We see that, oh, he had a scandal and then he's coming back. He must be assisted in coming back. But when women have
some even come back with nicknames.
Definitely. And we laugh about it, right? And also, and we like, oh, okay, at least we've seen, right? People make such jokes. But when a woman has done, there has a similar incident, the whole world is closing up on them. And there's no one to actually stand up for this particular woman and say that that woman is a human being, and they must be given the same grace that the man is given.
And I wonder if this is why women in media are not being taken serious, because men come across as confident, arrogant, and women are still portrayed as weak and timid. This is wrong in so many levels. And I encourage us to watch what we're consuming in the media and when we're selecting what we watch on media, because again, a male perspective still is standing strong. It's not just in South Africa, it's across the globe. It's happening in the US, it's happening in Canada, it's happening everywhere. And as consumers of media, we need to pay attention. This is essential. I found this wonderful discussion so enlightening and so relevant now in this day and age. We're in 2023 and things have changed. Women have evolved and we have broken many glass ceilings, but there's still so much work to do. What are your perspectives of women in the media? Do you feel that we're fairly represented? Do you feel the onus should be only on women? Or do you feel it should be a group effort that everybody needs to play their part? Do you feel that women's stories are being told in the right voice? I'd love to hear your comments in the comment section, so please take some time and drop them below. Let's have a discussion. I have a question for you. Have you taken time to subscribe to the channel yet? If not, I'm asking you why. It's free to do it, and I am encouraged when I see the subscriptions there. It's important for me to know that you're enjoying the content, but that also goes along with please hit the like and share button and hit that notification button so that you're notified each and every time I upload some new content. I'm encouraging us all to do a little bit of investigations ourselves. See how women are being represented in the media, on social media, in mass media, in your jurisdiction. I'd love to hear your feedback. Until next time, see you later. Bye.